Failure is just an idea, and it's up to you if you want to create that and experience it. And that is a thought and a belief. And Giannis is basically saying, there's no room in my mind for failure. That's just an idea, it's a thought, and I'm not letting that in my mind. He's like, yeah, sure, sometimes I win, sometimes I don't. Rather than thinking about changing your words, try and change who you're being. Try and change your ideas. Hey everyone, welcome back to another fun episode with me, your host, Dr. Derek Williams, on the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. I'm excited to share today's episode with you. It comes as a result of some of the things that I've been learning and going through. I recently recorded a podcast where I shared a little bit of my thoughts about mindset and the importance of it. That episode was called Feeling is the Secret. And just to quickly recap, because I think that these ideas are so important, and even if you listened and got a lot out of it, I want to remind you of those ideas. And if you didn't listen to it, go back and listen to that episode before you listen to today's episode, because it's not going to be as meaningful and impactful for you. So last episode, I talked about this idea that our beliefs and our thoughts about ourselves and about the world around us determine our perception of the world. And our perception of the world leads to how we act and react in the world. And our actions lead to our results. And it's this domino effect. And so you can focus on any one of those things. But the very beginning is your beliefs and thoughts. I kind of outlined a possible way for how you can change some of your beliefs and thoughts. And in today's episode, I want to give kind of an example of a specific belief and thought, a frame of mind that you can develop further. And that last episode kind of gives you kind of the runway or a little bit of a blueprint for how to change some of those thoughts and make that part of your belief, part of your system that's going on in your background, those thoughts that are going on all throughout the day that are leading to our actions and our results, but we just don't recognize it. It's down in the subconscious. They're just these automatic thoughts that are always going. So the idea today that I want to share comes up because over the years, I've had a lot of conversations with clients about developing an abundance mindset. There's so many times that we have thoughts along the lines of, this month was good, but what if next month, I don't know. What's the likelihood that next month is going to be as good? The economy's doing okay right now, but gosh, it could get bad. Man, I mean, there's with what's happening with rates and like everything that's going on, it's election year. Oh, what's going to happen? There's a lot of these thoughts that show a scarcity mindset. A scarcity mindset is the opposite of an abundance mindset. And I want to kind of help you understand the difference between these two frames of mind and how that makes such an impact. Because a lot of people think, hey, if I can just put in the same actions, does it really matter what my mindset and what my beliefs are? And it may be possible, but I don't think so. I think that, again, these thoughts and beliefs lead to your perception and they directly influence your actions and how you approach certain things. And so I'm going to talk about this in a few different ways. I'm going to give some examples in your office, in your relationships, and give some kind of practical advice for how you can develop more of an abundance mindset and how this is actually going to play into that. So there is a book that I really enjoy. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics, and the title will sound funny and almost like sci-fi, but it's not at all. Basically, this book was written by a plastic surgeon. His name was Maxwell Maltz, and this guy had a good, successful career, and he noticed over time that the people that he saw kind of could fall into different camps as far as the results. He could have two patients that went through an almost identical procedure procedure, almost identical physical changes, and one patient would experience this, life-changing mindset shift about themselves with their confidence and things like that. And then he would see patients similar in a similar situation that would come back and say, I don't think there was any improvement. In some ways, I think I look worse. And when everyone around them would look at them and easily say, oh no, you look way better. And so what that led him to was looking into and understanding the psychology, the beliefs about themselves that different people had and why they reacted in different ways. So one of these chapters goes through and talks about, in my opinion, it's talking about the abundance mindset. He doesn't use the word abundance mindset, but I recognized it as being that. And so it's really interesting. I want to talk through that a little bit. He talks about basically the idea that someone can generally, 99% of people are going to perform to the best of their ability and in a much higher level of performance when they are in a state where they don't feel like there is a lot of pressure. They basically have an idea, or the way that they're viewing themselves is, hey, it's no big deal what the outcome is here. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to let the outcome fall where it is. And I think recently, I think of Scotty Scheffler winning the Masters. I think I should look it up, but he made a kind of a similar comment that basically was like, he talked about how years in the past he would have felt kind of a lot of pressure, but at this point he kind of feels like, it's the words he put it was, it's God's will. If it's God's will, then I'll win it. If not, then that's fine too. So basically what he's doing is he's setting himself up where he has nothing to lose. And that allowed him to perform. And Sunday at the Masters, it was looking like it was going to be really tight. And he pulled away there at the end with several birdies and took the outstanding lead. And it was really, really cool to watch. Part of the way that you and I can apply this in a very simple way is to go through the thought process of imagining the worst case scenario. If you remember, I did this with a client, Melanie Villalobos, in California. We recorded a podcast episode. It's probably been a year or two ago, but the title of it was basically like best case, worst case scenario. And I didn't realize at the time that I was in a way helping her to develop an abundance mindset. And the way that this works is if you imagine the worst case scenario of a situation that you're in, and then you can kind of think through, okay, in the worst case scenario, this is what I would do. This is how I would approach it. This is what would happen. And you can recognize, oh, things would still be okay. At that point, if you can come to accept that idea that even the worst case scenario you could come to terms with and you'd still be okay, that will allow you and help you to take the pressure off of yourself. When you can do that, it will lead you to the feeling that there's no pressure, and at this moment, you'll be able to perform to the best of your ability. Another interesting example of this is I watched a documentary about Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I don't remember the title. It was on Amazon Prime. I think it was just one documentary, a couple hours long. It could have been a few episodes. I'm not sure, but I'm sure you can find it. But there was one point that I thought was very interesting. The interviewer was asking Giannis, was saying, "Man, you are on this team where you're kind of like the all-star. Like there's a ton of pressure on you to perform and to lead the team and yada yada." And basically asked him, like, how do you not feel the pressure? And Giannis almost kind of laughed and basically said, like, man, it was only a few years ago. He said a few weeks before I was drafted to the NBA, I was selling merchandise on the streets. Like I was literally out, when you think of like going in a lot of third world countries and how, people are walking around on just selling food at your windows or trinkets and stuff like that. Like that was Giannis. He was doing that, and he was doing it so he could buy food that day. Like that's how his family lived. So when they asked him, "Oh, how do you feel? What about this pressure that's on you?" And he said, "Pressure?" It's like, this isn't pressure. He's like, I felt pressure when I was having to survive. This isn't pressure. Like, what's the worst case scenario? Like, worst case scenario, I still have a very cushy life for the rest of my life. And I think, that may be hard for some of us to think, well, yeah, of course, that's Giannis, so that's easy for him to say. I'm not that successful, and I'm not sure I'm going to have a cushy life. No, you are. I've talked about it before. I did another episode talking about the fact that we need to take more risks, that we live in the safest time in history where you can go bankrupt. You can literally like lose everything and you're still going to have food provided for you and you're still going to have shelter. Like that's pretty much the world we live in. So don't tell me that there's a lot of pressure on you. Any pressure that is there is because you've created it yourself. So a lot of people talk about the fear of failure. And Giannis, when he was asked about this, he said, failure does not exist. He says, failure is something that we have created. What exists is that we did not accomplish our goals. So he basically is saying what I laid out in that last episode in talking about feeling is the secret. Failure is just an idea, and it's up to you if you want to create that and experience it. And that is a thought and a belief. And Giannis is basically saying, there's no room in my mind for failure. That's just an idea. It's a thought, and I'm not letting that in my mind. He's like, yeah, sure. Sometimes I win, sometimes I don't, but that's not failure. So that's a really, really cool. Another example that psychocybernetics talks about the golfer Ben Hogan, that basically he would practice in a way where when he was in practice, he would try and hit different shots. He would be very strategic. But then when he was out on the course, he basically would put all of that aside and he would play in a way where when he stepped up to take a shot, he would visualize in his mind the kind of shot that he wanted to hit, where he wanted it to go, what he wanted it to look like, and then he would step up and he would take the shot. He wouldn't think strategically about that. He basically was allowing his muscle memory to kick in. A big part of that has to do with our mental state that we're in. If we can accept that we're okay, then we can perform in this very fluid way that allows us to reach higher levels of performance. Let me share a couple examples in dentistry. One way that I see this a lot has to do with diagnosis and treatment planning. So remember how I talked about how your thoughts and feelings are communicated, that 90% of your communication is nonverbal, essentially? Well, what does that mean in diagnosis and treatment planning? It means that if you create a treatment plan and you're with the patient and you're talking about it, and there is thoughts and feelings in your head that, oh, I don't think this patient's going to accept this. Like, I don't think they have money. I'm afraid that they're going to think that I'm just out for money. Like, that's what's going to be communicated. You can script out the words, you can have the perfect words, but your thoughts and feelings are still going to come through. And those thoughts and feelings are going to be fear, discomfort. That's what's going to come across to the patient. So even if you get those words perfect, you're going to be in a headspace that's not going to allow them to feel really comfortable as far as like trusting and feeling good about moving forward with you. If you can realize some of those thoughts and those feelings, then you have the ability to change. And again, going back to best case and worst case scenario, I was recently talking to someone that was basically sharing this exact thought process with a patient. They were going into a consult with a patient and the patient looked like they were homeless and they needed a lot of work. This person did like a lot of big cases, big surgeries, all on four type of stuff. And so she said, when she was talking about it, she said, I thought, man, there's no way they're going to accept this. So I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to learn as much from this experience as possible. Probably nothing's going to happen, but I'm just going to treat them like I would anybody else. And I'm just going to learn from the situation. She goes in, she pitches and basically presents all on four upper and lower arches. The patient paid for it that day, 50 grand. Why? I hope you're asking that question. Why? Because I just laid out and said, if there's a lot of fear that this person may not accept treatment or they can't afford it, then that's what's going to be communicated. But the key is, that's not what was communicated. That was an initial thought in this person's mind, in this woman's mind. But when what she did is she basically said, oh, worst case scenario, they're not going to accept anything. And that's totally fine. So all the pressure's off me. So I'm just going to go in and pitch the best case that I know how. And awesome outcome. The way that you can apply that in your practice is basically the same. You can recognize that going into and talking with patients, worst case scenario, they don't accept anything. Guess what? You're still going to be okay. You got other patients on the schedule. You got other things to do. And when you can go into it with that type of mindset and recognize that worst case scenario is going to be totally fine, that takes the pressure off of you. That's a big part of what led me to very high case acceptance in my practice, was essentially the idea that I didn't want to communicate pressure. I didn't want to communicate fear. or discomfort to patients. I basically just wanted to be myself. I wanted to be comfortable. And my goal was just to align my interests with the patient. I wanted to let them know, hey, this is what I would recommend. This is what I think would be best in your situation. What do you think about that? What are your priorities? This is what I would do, but those aren't my teeth. They're yours. So obviously this decision is completely up to you. So if I'm thinking and feeling those things and I can communicate in that way and my thoughts and feelings can be aligned with my words, then that makes a huge difference to the patient. And I've basically experienced the same thing with clients. When we can evaluate the ideas, the thoughts and feelings that are in the dentist's mind when they're going into these types of situations, same type of outcome. It's the same thing when you're talking with your staff. If you're trying to communicate something and you have to have a difficult conversation, again, the thing I hear all the time from dentists is, well, I don't know how to have this conversation. I don't know what to say. And a lot of times my response lately is, think more about what you want to feel. And it sounds funny. It's like, a little woo-woo, but that's the truth. If you can go into a situation focusing on how you want to feel and how you want to perceive the situation with your employee, that's going to guide your actions. It doesn't mean that you don't think about the words, but it means that you change and you adjust. And instead of, a really good thing that I've talked to a lot of people about, which I may have mentioned before, is to go into those difficult conversations, not imagining and visualizing yourself as being on opposite sides of the table, and that like, I'm coming in as your boss, you're my employee, and my job is to get you to come to my side of the table. Another way to visualize it is to think, okay, hey, you and I, we're on the same team. We're on the same side of the table. So let's look across the table at this obstacle that you're facing and let's brainstorm together. That's a completely different approach. It's a completely different mindset, a different view, and that's going to shape your actions. It's going to shape your words. And the biggest thing is, even if the words were the exact same, your feelings and your thoughts are going to be different, and that employee is going to feel that, they're going to sense that, and you're going to have a different outcome. To kind of wrap things up, just to share a little bit, if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you probably have noticed a difference in my voice in the last year, probably 2, I'm guessing. Because as I have gone through different situations where I have realized that there's not any pressure, that I'm going to be fine either way, that allows me to take the pressure off of myself and just be who I am, to be my most authentic version of myself. It wasn't until the last year that I started doing podcast episodes where I would just close my eyes and talk into the microphone. And that's been a really cool experience where I feel like I can just be myself. And those have been some of the episodes that I've heard so much of the feedback on from others, basically saying like, wow, I really related. I really appreciate you putting yourself out there and just being vulnerable and sharing those things. And so that comes across. So what my point is for all of you that are practicing dentists in those kinds of situations, rather than thinking about changing your words, try and change who you're being. Try and change your ideas. If you can get rid of the scarcity mindset, rid of the fears, and recognize that things are going to be okay either way, that really your only goal is to be your authentic version of yourself, that if you can accomplish that, that ultimately is going to lead to an abundance mindset, meaning you already have enough now. And if you grow, you're still going to have enough. You're going to have even more of enough. And even if you have less, that you'll still have enough. That's an abundance mindset. It's basically saying there's enough for all of us at all times. There's not a scarcity. And we're lucky to live in a world where that is actually pretty close to reality. It really is. So thank you for listening. And I hope that you're able to apply some of these things. Think inside of your mind. What are the thoughts that are going on deep down? What perceptions are they leading to? And what actions are those thoughts leading to? And then what results does that get you in your life? So I appreciate your time. Feel free to reach out. Let me know if there's other questions that you have, or if you'd like to consider working together one-on-one, let me know. Derek, DEREK at thelifestylepractice.com. Take care, everyone. Never stop pushing yourself. Never stop growing, because that's what life is about. In my opinion, it's love and growth. And that's my message. That's ultimately my goal in every day that I live, is to get to love more and to grow more. So thanks for being a part of my journey. Take care, and we'll talk to you next time.
than your average, slicker than your average.